It's a little bit technical, so I'm going to try to do it simple. But uh, Electronic Arts, for a long time, made console games, and they're like, we want to do online games, but we don't know anything about it. So they bought a company that I happened to work at called Kesmai that happened to provide games to this small little company called America Online at the time when America Online was the internet, like all of it. And they decided to launch 60 games that are all new on a website, on the AOL Games channel, on the internet, without knowing anything about any of those things. And they promised all of their stock analysts that they would do it in 2 months, essentially. And along the way, someone had this great idea of putting the word uppercase TEST in every single URL because clearly it was a test. This is the test environment, and that's where we did all of our testing. And that URL was going to end up being publicly visible. And so you could imagine a bunch of America Online users trying to deal with test in their URL and bookmarks and everything else. And if that changed ever, all those things would break. And so they're like, oh, we can't do that. We can't launch. We have to delay the launch. And the CEO of Electronic Arts wandered into the office and said, hey, this happens, we're going to take a 20% stock hit. The analysts are going to go bonkers and we're going to lose billions of dollars of stock value. This cannot happen. So we had a 60-person meeting and went through all of the classic responses. Well, we're going to go through and we're going to edit every single web page and change the word test and remove it. And because at the time, the tool chains just weren't there. This is all in Java. And then we're going to QA it, and it's going to take us 6 weeks, and it's going to delay the project. And there's just no way we can QA it. It's 1,500 pages and 65 games because the URLs were embedded into the games themselves. So we're going to have to recompile all 65 games. And these were, Madden. I mean, this is not a small game. Madden football is a big game. This is a multi-billion-dollar a year property. Like, oh, we have to recompile Madden. Oh, yeah, that'll work. To remove the word test. And so what I did was point out that, hey, you know, buried inside of that pile of Java code is a routine that goes and looks for where files are on the file system. And that directory had the word test in it. And that matches to where the URL had the word test in it. And so if we just change that one little bit of routine inside the Java code, we can not have to do all that QA right now, and we can ship tomorrow because we can just delete the word test from looking it up in the file system. And a bunch of people freaked out because, oh no, we can't do that. We can't do that. Because there's a lot of people thinking we have to do it the conventional rules way. And I'm like, hey, we're game programmers. Since when do we do anything the conventional way? You have to evoke an identity to get people to think outside the box a little bit. And so I went there and basically said, hey, this is possible. It's an option. We can tell them, get permission. We can make a 100-line change inside of someone else's closed source code by patching it because we've done this before because we fixed Sony's stuff. We fixed Nintendo stuff. We fixed Microsoft stuff. If we do it for their console on the console environment, we can do it here on the web pages too. And then I had to leave. So I left. And the next day I got pulled aside. One of the engineers who was sitting in the back of the room heard me, did it, and said, hey, I did this thing. It turned out to be 22 lines of code, not 100. And I'm like, yeah, that's great estimation. And I'm like, great, let's do it. And so I went and found somebody and we got approval and we said, we're going to give this a try. We're just going to see if this works. And it's the puppy dog sale. Can you just hold the puppy for a minute and see if you're okay with that? And because the operations guys are like, you're patching someone else's software. We got them to buy into it. We called the software company telling, this is WebLogic at the time. We told WebLogic, hey, we're going to do it. WebLogic's like, sure, great, go ahead. So we got legal permission and everything else and went through all the things and got that change made and shipped on time. And one of the ways that I thought that was really interesting about that was it was a technical decision that was really, what are all of the options? And they just ruled out an option as not possible. We can't do that without even putting it on the list and considering whether or not you could not do that in a group setting. People, because other people have the same idea because everyone else is just ruling it out. That's choice point one. Point two was they wanted to call it They wanted to call it the Andrew patch. And I'm like, no, 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 no. All I did was say that there's a door here. It's locked. Maybe somebody can come over here and jiggle the key, but there's a door here. You need to call it the Mick patch because Mick is the guy that did it. And what you want to do in that kind of context here is make technical decisions, but also the people that actually do the work, need to get acknowledgement and recognition. And that enabled that sort of story went through, and Max has heard that story, and every one of the 65 games heard that story. Madden heard that story. Said, this is the guy that solved the problem that way. And so when I went to them to have future conversations, they were much more politically receptive because they knew that they were going to get credit. They knew I wasn't here from the headquarters trying to lord over them and tell them what to do. I just wanted to try and solve everybody's problems and get software shipped. And so that's the way that the technical decisions changed the future of that project, because it changed the political tenor, because this is coming out of headquarters, and EA is this 6,500 person company in 8 countries and 22 time zones. I mean, it's ridiculous. We were a global company before anybody else was doing that. And so that really changed the tenor of the project. That one little choice and repeated action along those lines. And you had an unproven organization at headquarters doing all of this stuff that nobody really knew what it was. I mean, this is the days of America Online. People didn't know what HTTPS meant. People know now, and ordinary people know now, not just guys that read. Or yeah, this is This was before PayPal. We come into existence before PayPal starts. PayPal starts while we're doing our job, and PlaySpan acquires us just before the 2008 financial crisis. So not exactly the smoothest financial sailing waters at the time. And so one of the things I learned there that has absolutely changed the way I solve any problem or decision I make now is when I make a decision, I think about how long it's going to take to go from I made the choice, how long is it going to take to actually appear in the real world? Because I have to assume in the middle that things are going to change. Chaos is a given. The military says the enemy gets a vote. A little bit more democratic than one would think for the military, but something is going to change between your choice and what you decide to do and actually implementing it. Even if you implemented exactly what you decided to do, which never happens, but you get close. Hopefully, the environment changes, and so you have to plan on and think about what am I going to do when. And so with PlaySpan um, and Payback Cash before that, we constantly had the problem of we would get paid one week, but then we wouldn't actually get settled the funds and get given the money until 6 weeks later, 10 weeks later. And we would have to give the money to somebody else in between, potentially before or potentially after. Um, and all of these things would be in different currencies. So the customer would be in country A, paying in currency A. It would get converted into currency B to be given to us, and then converted into currency B to give it given to us, currency C to be given to the vendor, the merchant actually selling the goods online. Because the way the PlaySpan worked was the game company would partner with us, or actually Microsoft. We process Skype payments and Facebook payments and Disney payments. They would partner with us, and then we would show up on their checkout page like a PayPal bill, and dealing with currency conversion rates just over time. It's just a constant. And you'd have, in between around the financial crisis, you had situations where you'd have currencies move by 10 and 15 and 20%. And so you have to prepare for that. You have to assume that's going to happen. You have to expect that that's going to happen. You have to be shocked when it doesn't happen. Is the default thing that's the absolute best thing I learned, because you contingency plan. You just constantly contingency plan, and that flows through in terms of technical implementations and business operations, strategic product design choices. All of that stuff needs to reflect that variability. So the many of the payment systems that we interoperated with were not reversible. So credit cards are reversible and they're also instantaneous, but only at the time, like 2% of people had a credit card in Brazil, for example. Brazil's the fourth most populous country in the world, probably want to do business there. And so, and the way this would go is we would the customer would go to a checkout page. They would say, I'm going to buy this for my Brazilian real. And they would say, buy. And instead of typing in a credit card number, a piece of paper comes out of the printer. They get a barcode that they take to their bodega down at the corner, and they scan it like they're buying a bottle of soda. They give them cash. Now, great, there's cash in the cash register at the bodega. Okay, we've got a barcode notification that we're now on the hook for, um, to because we know that the customer said they want to buy it. So do they have their goods yet? Do we give them their digital goods? And so we potentially, remember this whole time thing. They say, how long does it take them to walk to their bodega? How long does it take for the bodega to get the cash from the cash register to the bank? Whoops, the Brazilian real is broken. You can't currency at the time. You can't currency convert it from Brazilian real to any other currency. So what do? You buy coffee beans and you put them on a boat and you ship them to Houston, and then you sell the coffee beans, and all this takes time. And now you have got money in an account that you can then convert, because of course the merchants in Europe, so they want it in euro, and you have to manage all these flows. And so you're constantly paying attention to up and down, even real world commodity prices. And so one of the ways we solved this was coffee beans tend to be a pretty stable thing. And so we would partner with import export merchant people selling goods in and out of Brazil, both directions. And we would pick people who had relatively stable stores of value. That's a tricky thing to do. But once we had like 4 of them, because we kept needing bigger dump trucks to drive our money around in, because we just kept pushing so much money through, and it's out of Brazil, that we just had to partner with more and more import export people to try and figure out a way to do this, because I wasn't going to get in the coffee bean business. I love coffee. I will find experts who do that and then partner with them. And so it was a very complex partnership arrangement. And so we mitigated risk by diversifying across assets, essentially, would be one way to think about it at the highest level. They think it's easy. They always think it's easy. And I think probably the thing that makes a founder think it's easy is because they tend to approach things from this constant change mindset of, I'm trying to change the world. So of course everyone else wants to be in a world that changes, and not everybody does. And people get very concerned, and they have, I'll pick mindfully, you sort of specifically. So imagine you're a therapist working with a client who's going through trouble, and you are emotionally invested. You want to do a good job. You want them to succeed. You want them to be healthy. You want them to move forward and get through their challenges. And that's what that is. That's what you want more than anything else in the world. Paperwork be damned. And so if the paperwork has to change, or we have to do things a little differently, all of those are distractions from my core mission of, I want to be an empathetic human being and help other humans. And so founders tend to, and I don't want to pick on Mindfully per se, because I've seen this at every single gaming studio. I've seen this at 1,000 different merchants. It's through the placement. Everybody does this. We go, this is what's important to me. And you have to forget that there's people in the equation just as much as there is technology and systems and business and environment and everything else. People they need to be, you have to help them change. They don't just upgrade to 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. They'll just can't just push a button. They need a little bit more help. And I wish that people would be a little kinder. A bit more kind, maybe raw hard word, a little bit more empathetic of how long that change takes to happen. I would say be curious. Always be curious. Always assume that you don't know quite everything, and there might be something else. And you can ask why, you can ask what, you can ask how. You can, it's just always assume that there might be just a little bit more on the other side that you haven't thought it through. I've done the founding thing. It's a little bit like, I've got a divining rod and there's water exactly here. And that is absolutely necessary as part of the founding experience, because you are ultimately going beyond the pale and doing something that no one else has ever done before in some way. I mean, some things are iterative off of others. You're not necessarily making a completely new thing, but even if you're not, even it's different somehow. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. And so that difference is the part that's specifically yours that you're bringing into the world. But you need to be genuinely curious about what else could be different. What else could be? Is this difference a distinction or just a difference? And so you need to communicate with customers. You need to communicate with stakeholders. You need to communicate with people that you're working with. And I say with, not leading or for you. So the experience I've had as a person who comes in and works on projects in very intense ways during parts of their life cycles, one of the benefits for me as somebody that does it is it exactly suits who I am. I'll use a rocket analogy because I used to work for NASA, so I get to do that. So I like to build rockets. I like to put all of the stuff on the rocket. Man, that rocket gets 6 feet off the ground, I'm bored out of my mind. I couldn't possibly care less. I'm like, okay, fine, it's done. Where's the next rocket? I want to go build more rockets. Uh, and uh, and it's because it's somebody else's problem now to fly the rocket and do all the other stuff, and they've got their own set of procedures and their own people and personalities and things that they like to do. They're flying rockets. I like to build. And so the benefits of going fractional is I get to be part of the life cycle of software development in the parts of that life cycle that I am best suited to do. And I'm not part of the projects during the life cycles that I'm not the best suited. And so from a company perspective, what you do is you get individuals who are best suited for where the company is at any given moment for any given project. Because they all have ebbs and flows. They have starts, they have middles, they have beginnings, they have ends, they have crises, and you put people in place that match that nature. And the challenge that a company might have is ensuring continuity. And so you have to make sure that you have continuity of knowledge. And so once I've built the rocket, yeah, you need to know everything there is I did about the rocket. It can carry this much, it takes this fuel, launch it between 10 and 11, don't launch it, below 32 degrees, all these rules. But once we describe what it is, you need to make that continuity and keep that along. That's sort of challenge one. Challenge two would be, I would say, ensuring that the commander's intent, why are we doing this way? What is the goal? Ensuring that that's communicated effectively across all of the people who aren't necessarily there for extended periods of time. Sometimes it takes a long time for the whys to seep in. And what I would tell you is it shouldn't, and it doesn't have to. The military is particularly good at communicating the why they're going to do any one particular thing very, very quickly. And they have a process, and they have documents, and they have forms, and they have point slides even that are specifically templated to do this. And so I think that that's something that companies need to have in place as a communication to get people on board, get people into the similar directions, but then get the right people for the moment that the project that the company is working on is in. One of the things I try to do is I try to look for people who believe the world is a particular way and it always will be a particular way, and it has been and will be, and just kind of nudge them a little bit towards the maybe things change a little. Maybe I can change. And here's some way I can get a new skill that's useful and fun for me. I love to try that mindfully. For example, one of the people that I worked with a lot, she had the office title of assistant office manager or some silliness. And I just started calling her product owner. And in Scrum terms, that means that she is the responsible authority for where requirements and knowledge about what the thing it is that we're doing needs to do. Even though she worked for me, um, and I was technically head of product was my official job title, I called her the product owner. And there were two words there. One, owner. You are responsible. You are empowered to make choices. And that never even occurred to her that she could make these choices, and repeatedly helping her do that. And so over a period of time, she became a much more effective and much more capable individual. And now that company has that person. And they had that person, but now they really have that person. And they're getting much more out of what that person is capable. And that's what I like to do. That's what I'm here for. There's two aspects to that for me. So I've walked into that situation more times than I can. And I'm going to go back to my rocket analogy. So the other time that I'm useful on a development lifecycle is in exactly that situation. So we've gotten in a rocket. I built the thing and we launched it, and I got bored. And I got bored all the way until we got in our lunar lander and we're 6 feet from the moon. And there's a rock in the way, and we don't have enough propellant to move the spacecraft to avoid hitting the rock. Maybe. So what are we going to do? I'm the guy that you want flying the spaceship at that point, because my heartbeat's not going to change. That's just who I am. And so step one is don't panic. Don't be driven by your emotional state. Don't get sucked into their emotional state. And you'd be amazed how pacing and leading people down from high levels of emotional state, because you do have to pace. You can't just be, I'm cool as a cucumber. If they're panicked and out of their mind, you kind of need to go there a little bit, but you need to walk them down to, I'm out of my emotional mind and I'm into my rational mind. One of the ways that you do that is there's two ways. One, you show up with absolutely zero ego. I mean, if you walk in the door going, I'm the king and I know everything, you're doomed. Step two is you ask them why. You ask them how. You ask them what. You ask them questions. And the quality of the questions get them to start talking about things that they can see and understand. And you start to get a lay of the land, because your primary job when you walk into there is trying to figure out, what is the current situation? As often as not, things are chaotic because we don't understand what's happening. Not because things went wrong, not because we just don't have enough information about now. And so that's where I need to start, is information about now. And then try and figure out how we got there and try and figure out where we need to go next. And so I need to ask where do we want to be once I understand what we're doing now. So it's a little bit of it's an art. it takes it takes a little bit of trial and error to get that right. And I'm not perfect at it, but I'm pretty good at it. I've been a business owner, and it's my, and my precious, and I can make a Lord of the Rings reference. Is that okay? But I mean, some people get really wrapped up in their thing. And I think that happens because that's their full-time thing. It's what they focus on every day, and that they're absolutely doing an important thing. It's necessary. But the more they can figure out ways to share the thing with other people and share as much of it as they possibly can, so that it's our thing and it's a collaborative environment and other people are contributing, and other people feel ownership too, I think they'll be happier. And a fractional person is that way by default. They're going to come in and they're responsible for their piece. I mean, I'm absolutely going to be responsible for the piece that I'm going to do. And maybe it's just one lug nut over there that I tightened, but man, that's my lug nut and I did it the best I could. And it's still ours, and I'm going to feel ownership over that lug nut. It's silly, but it's true. It just is. It's the way people are. And a full-time leader should embrace that, and just treat all of their employees as gifts that they only have for a period of time. And so they need to take maximum advantage out of it and enrich their lives and be enriched. Let's talk about responsibility. I started in the military environment, with NASA. So I had two sort of points of view on that, where you had to sort of, you can't just pull your spaceship over and fix it, man. When you ship it, it's shipped and it's gone. No patching, none of this stuff. I mean, you can kind of. I mean, the Voyager people are moving mountains to keep that spacecraft continuing to operate, but you don't get to fix it. And you have the military, where the downside consequence is basically unlimited. Um, and so walking in there in an environment where I was working for a 4-star command and wandering around all of Europe, parts of Africa, the Christian parts of the Middle East, ex-CIS states, I mean, big territory, with military forces spread everywhere, influencing what they did. And with people that thought in those terms, the downside risk of this change is unlimited that you're asking me to do. Um, uh, it really taught me to be very careful about being directive. And so if I'm going to say, do X, It's 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 going to be really deliberated. I'm going to do my darndest to get you to say I'm going to do X. And if I have to direct you to do X, I kind of view that as failing. Would be the simplest thing. I would much rather have it be your idea because we have a shared worldview about what's going on, what needs to be done, and what are the options are, and which one is the best option. And so that influenced my level of how I thought about leading, because I was a 20-year-old kid telling 4 stars the way it's going to be, and so you can do that, but they don't take direction from 20-year-old kids. And so it's an interesting experience because you still have to succeed, because darn it, you've got to get this thing fielded and it's got to go. And yes, the downside risk is unlimited, but the upside is also there. And the shared worldview, because everybody wants the best for everyone. And so that's really kind of the balance between the two, is balancing the best for everyone, downside risk, and then not having to force people to do things. Yeah, it's a tricky problem because you do have deadlines. You do have to get things done by a particular time. And so the one thing that I would say is it's important you communicate with a decision how confident you are. Physics comes with this idea of error bars, plus or minus. And so anytime you take a measurement, it's off by this or that. And so the trick, I think, the thoughtful part is really saying, hey, I've thought about this decision. I think this is a good decision because X, Y, and Z. Here's ways I could be wrong, and this is how likely I think I am to be correct. And a lot of people don't include all of that secondary information, because that's the person that's what people really need to hear is what if you're wrong? What could happen? How likely is it you're right or wrong? Do we need to upgrade from node 20 to node 21? That's that's a decision. It's a sustainable thing. We need to get onto the long-term version, off the developed version. Yeah, all those are sustainable reasons. The downside risk is, do we need to do it this week? you know and so what are the implications of changing a couple 100,000 lines of code that we depend on? Um, and you have to communicate that out and say, this is the risk. We can test for it. Something might break. Let me phrase that differently. Something will break. I don't know what it is, and so here's my plan to deal with it. And you see the difference? And once you communicate that, people feel a lot more comfortable with the decision, because they know that you're going to be able to handle the ramifications of the decision, that you're responsible for not only the choice, taking the position clearly, but also dealing with what happens next. Because that's what people really want. Is they don't want to get handed a big, a hand grenade that's going to blow up. They want to know that somebody's going to be able to deal with the problem. I like working on lots of different projects. I'm looking for challenges, and I need harder stuff. So bring me the hardest things. I'd like to kind of get back into FinTech, to be honest. I really like the financial challenges, and over the last couple months, it's been a financially challenging environment, and I'm like, I want to get back in there.